Morning, everybody. I wanted to do some review for you for confidence intervals and hypothesis testing for um, two proportion um, problems, finding the difference. And so I want to start with this question. Here's all the question. Let me hide this here so you can take a moment to look at it. Think about what you might want to do. Pause this if you want, and then I'm going to quickly go through this first question. Okay. So they're talking about illiteracy between men and women in Qatar. And they're saying they want to know if there's a higher rate, so a higher rate from men than women. And you know what? I'm terrible at this. I always do this, right? I make my lines look awful. So let me make a line that's more like this. How about this? Better. And then I will do this and I'll bring it up. Okay. So that's what we're going to be looking for here. So I want to do a few things. First of all, super important when we're doing two proportion tests and intervals that we state what our parameters are, because in this case, the parameters are going to be different. So I'm going to call my P1 is going to be the men in Qatar. And P2 in this case is going to be women, and that'll help me in Qatar. It'll help me get my thoughts together as far as what I need to have first, etc. It's certainly saying that the literacy rate is greater in higher rate of literacy in men than women. So we're going to, certainly have that as our literacy rate being bigger for that one. So let me group this and make it smaller. So our null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So our null hypothesis is going to be P minus P1 minus P2 is equal to 0. You could also, of course, write it as P1 is equal to P2. I'm going to write the null hypothesis is P1 minus P2 is greater than 0. Why is it greater? Because we're trying to say that if the probability, the proportion is higher in men, that would therefore make the number greater than 0. Okay, so let's talk about the assumptions and conditions. We have random. We have independent groups because they're men and women, independent of each other, each person. It is certainly less than 10% of the Qatar population, or Qatar, they sometimes say. And NP and Q, the success failure. So let's do that. So we're going to have first with P1, we're going to have 45 is greater than 10. And therefore, why are you making me do math this early in the morning? 254 through 34 minus 45, 189 would be those who are not illiterate. And then P2 is going to be 42 is greater than 10. And 251 minus 42 is 209 are not illiterate. So I guess they're literate. So all conditions met. We can use the two proportion z-test for population for population. Okay, so let me do this. Let me make this smaller, get this out of the way. All right, so we named it. So I'm going through phantoms. Okay, phantoms. I'd rather have this long way, but whatever. Phantoms, right? So now we named the test. So now we're going to do the test. So let's go to our calculator and let's do this. So we're going to go to on I'm going to go to stat. I'm doing a test right now, so I'm going to go down to the 2 proportion Z test. I'm going to put in 45 for the men and 234 for the men. And then I'm going to put in 42 for the women and 251 for the women. It is going to be, so you see how this is written. So I have to think about this for a minute. It's going to be P1 is greater than P2. They're looking for illiteracy, greater illiteracy, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so I'm left with, I think I can write, and I can't write here. I thought I could. I'm going to copy it real quick because that's what I like to do. And that way we have it written down in front of us. The last thing I want to do before I move on to doing my final analysis, I'm going to say that I'm going to use an alpha level. Alpha level equals 0.05, okay? Make sure you note that. Supposed to do it at the beginning. I always do it at the end. Everyone always does it at the end. But we're using 0.05, so it's fine. So what am I going to say? I'm going to type this, please. Because the p-value of 0.237 is, that should be 0.237. Oh, that's annoying that it's doing that. It's making my point up here. Is more than the alpha level of 0.05. We fail to reject the null hypothesis. There is no evidence that men have a proportion of illiteracy than women in Qatar. All right. I think calculator falling. I think I have everything. Let me just check everything. Awesome. And we're done. What questions do you have? Let me know. I'm going to have office hours today at, I think, 2:45. Okay. All right. So that's answered the total question for question 1. Second question, find with a 95% confidence level the difference in the proportions of illiteracy in men and women from Qatar. Interpret your interval. So interpret means context. Now we're using panic, but I don't have to worry about doing the assumptions. I already did them. I don't have to worry about the parameters. I already did them. So the parameters were done. So we're talking about panic now, right? We already did the parameters P. We already did the assumptions and conditions A. Now we're going to name what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be doing a 2 proportion Z interval. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Hopefully in my calculator, I don't know about this one because it's an older model, it should automatically bring in the data I just did. If it didn't, I'll just retype it in. And sure enough, it did. So now, oh, it's a test. That's why it all came in. Let's see if it works here. Go to the 1 proportion Z interval. Yes, it did as well. 95. I'm going to hit calculate. So I'm going to run down there. And in this case, I get negative 0.045 and 0.093. So let me do that. Now, negatives are okay because what the negative in this case is saying is that it could also go the opposite way, that the difference could actually be negative, that more women are illiterate in this country than men. So this negative of going from negative 0.045 or 044, sorry, to 0.093 is saying that it could actually swing the other way, that women could actually be more illiterate. For the difference could be 4.3% in the women's side, or not 0.9 9% on the men's side. So interpret it. So we are 95% confident that the true difference between illiteracy rates in Qatar between men and women is negative 4.35% to positive, I'll just write positive, so it's no's 9.34%. Done. Okay, awesome. So we're done with that. So the last question I have is, does the confidence interval provide evidence to support your answer from 1? So our answer from 1 said that we were going to, if you remember, we're going to reject, we're going to fail to reject the null hypothesis, right? And the reason why this confidence interval does provide evidence is because 0, which is the null hypothesis, is in the confidence interval. The interval provides evidence that our answer in 1 to fail to reject holds true, that there is no difference. Okay? Something like along those lines would be completely fine. I'm going to move on to the next question. Pause if you need to. The next question is from the 2015 AP. So I actually was a teacher when this was in AP, when this came out. So I hope most kids did well on it. I don't know. Take a moment to read it, and then we will quickly go through it. Okay, so again, I'm going to think to myself, phantoms. I saw some of you writing this down on some of your sheets. Fabulous. I really think that those who wrote it down got the question 100% right, or close to 100% right. You might have had some nuances as to maybe it should have been the hypothesis that the alternative hypothesis had a different sign or something similar, but you knew you had to do this, that, and other thing. So let's talk about this here for a minute. So we have P1. What's our P1 going to be here? I'm going to call my P1 my low dose aspirin. This is my let statement. Oh my gosh, my Algebra 1 teacher always told me to make a let statement. This is what we're doing here. Aspirin, and P2 is going to be the placebo. Okay. So what's our alternative and our null hypothesis? We're going to do our null hypothesis is going to be, I'm going to write it this way instead, is equal to P1, P2, just so we have different ways of seeing it. The alternative, they're saying that they want to know, provided convincing evidence that taking a low dose aspirin would reduce the chance of developing colon cancer. So in this case, P1 is going to be less than P2. Okay, I'm just looking for those numbers. The third thing that might come up, I don't have an example right now for it, is difference. Is there a difference? When it says, is there a difference, that's going to be not equal to. Okay, so let's go through. Do I need to do the assumptions and conditions again? Wow, what I want to do? I want to drag them over from the other page. I'll just go through it and I'll just confirm for you that these are all in fact true. The one thing I had to switch is some of the wording, but I'm just going to do that because it's the same. Get it into your mind. It's the same. Obviously, when we get to the next chapter, some of these are going to be a little bit different, but otherwise they're the same. It said that it was randomly assigned. It's right there, randomly assigned, independent groups of each other. We're assuming that they are independent, of course, because they are independent people. Less than 10% of all people with arthritis, And then the success failure, we had at the end of 6 years, 15 of the people developed colon cancer. 15 is greater. Out of how many was it? Half the volunteers. So wow. So a lot of people. So 485 did not have it. And then in the people who had the placebo, 26. 26. So now we are at, what did I just do here? Why did I do? Oh, because it's half, right? So it's going to be 574. No, 474. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, all conditions are met. We're going to use a two-proportion z-test for the populations. So now we just named it. So now let's do the test. So let's go here. Let's turn on. Let's go to stat tests. We're going to go to the two-proportion z-test. I'm going to put in my data. So it was 16 people, 15 out of 500. And then we had 26 out of 500. And in this case, P1 is less than P2. And I'm going to calculate it. So now my numbers that I'm going to write down, going out however many decimal places you need to, are right here. As I put this down, I'm going to also write down, use alpha level. Our alpha level is going to be alpha equals 0.05. Just write it down somewhere. Done. Okay. I'm not going to worry about it. Oh, they already told me. Oh, they told me already. Oh, good. So that made me a little happier that I didn't do it last minute. There it is right there. So now what are we going to do? We're going to do our, we obtained our p-value. So let's write it. P-value equals 0.03. 0.0397. Okay. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to now make our claim. I'm going to say because the p-value of 0.0397 is less than alpha level of 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis. And now we're going to state our conclusion. There is strong evidence that the low dose aspirin would reduce colon cancer. Okay. And we are done. So that is it for me for today. And I will have office hours this afternoon, and I'll have office hours tomorrow to get us ready for our test on Thursday. Have a wonderful day, everybody.